Okay, a very good morning to all of us joining the session today. So what we're going to cover as part of this session is governing SQL data sources with Microsoft Purview. We'll give you a broad overview of what Purview is and deeply dive into how it relates to SQL, how we enable connectivity to SQL, how we ensure mapping of SQL, discovery, policy, and so on. So by round of introduction, Vlad, do you want to go
I'm
first?
Vlad Rodriguez. I'm a PM at Microsoft. I work for the security platform team. I've been in that team for about 3 years. And I've been focusing mostly on the provisioning of access, RBAC and ABAC policies. I've launched several different integrations with SQL data sources as well as other data sources. Lately, I'm working on the classifications piece of Purview and the integration with M365, to your point. So we'll touch on some of those things. I'm really glad to see you here. It's my second year here at the past event, and I'm very excited. We'll have a good session.
My name is Vishal Anil. I'm a PM on the same security platform team focusing on Purview. I've been part of the team for a little bit more than 5 years now, so I've seen Purview when it was all on paper to what it is now. This has been a spectacular journey, especially partnering with MVPs and customers like yourself. I'm super excited to present what we have today to you guys as well, and really like people who are interested in governance. And if you work with SQL and databases, then I'm sure governance is top of mind for all of you. So what will you learn today? It's effectively across these 6 areas that we want to showcase what Purview does as it relates to SQL. The first very important announcement that we have is we're enabling Microsoft Purview Discovery, which is a free version of Microsoft Purview, and we'll go into all of the different features and capabilities it has to offer. We'll compare that with the enterprise version of Purview and when you must use the Discovery tier and when you're ready to upgrade to using the full-fledged product. The second is comprehensive coverage for the SQL family, right from source registration to scanning to classifying, mapping, and enabling discovery to your end users. The third is automated lineage, SQL provenance, custom lineage for SQL, because I know that's probably also top of mind for a lot of you as to how data is transformed and moved into and out of your SQL sources. Manual asset creation and curation. So we are an open API ecosystem, so you can bring in any kind of SQL source or non-SQL source into the system in order to be able to map and govern those assets. Data policies for SQL sources, including DevOps policies, which Vlad will deep dive on. And finally, audit. So in terms of anything that changes in the map and in Purview, we capture audit events, and you can go and investigate that. That's a new capability we've added over the past 3 months as well. In terms of questions, we would request that we hold questions till the end. So the format that we're using now is we're going to go through some slides and some information. Then I'm going to show you some really cool demos, and then switch over to Vlad, who will also go through some information and some demos. And then we can budget the last 10, 15 minutes for questions, if that works for everyone. So what we're learning from the market is data operations are increasingly interdisciplinary. And what we mean by that is data agility and right use go hand in hand. So we have all of our data engineers and scientists across the entire organization who want to find the data that's relevant to them to add business value, while at the same time, we have our chief privacy officers and our CISOs want to make sure that all of that data is used rightly. It's in compliance with corporate and legal regulation out there. So we're noticing that a lot of this goes hand in hand. Now, I think it was a question that was brought up that what's the story with M365 compliance and Azure Purview? So some of you might have heard that about a year ago, we announced this bigger brand of Microsoft Purview, which has a suite of different offerings. Now, In the old world, what that meant is bringing together what was formerly Microsoft 365 compliance and what was Azure Purview. A majority of our discussions today will be focused on unified data governance with Azure Purview, but we'll touch upon how these two families of solutions are coming together into one big brand. So there were a lot of announcements made yesterday at Ignite as well regarding the same exact topic, along with some really cool demos that you can go look back on as well. So this is the architecture slide for Purview. I'm sure some of you might have seen this. If this is the first time you're seeing this, then we have support for governing and connecting to 55 plus sources that ranges from relational databases to data lakes to SaaS and analytics services. And all of this is powered by what we call the platform. The ability to connect to these sources, scan, classify, get that inventory into the map, so that all of these different applications that sit on top of the platform and map can leverage that information and can provide specific solutions to personas that we're calling out at the top there. So to give you an example, once you have this data available in the map, how do you enable it for search and browse so that your data producers and consumers can come in and discover data that adds business value to their processes? Or if you have data engineers and SMEs, how do you ensure that all of your data in SQL or in a data lake has the highest standards of quality? And that's how we provide data quality capabilities. Some of this is in preview today. Some of it is in GA, which you will see via the annotations in the blue boxes. So let's go into the big announcement that we have for you guys today, which is the Microsoft Purview Discovery, which is the free version of Microsoft Purview. At the core of it, the value proposition is along those 4 pivots. First is live view, search, and browse. What do we mean by that? If you have, let's say, read access to a bunch of Azure SQL databases across the board, across subscriptions, what we make super easy for you via Microsoft Purview Discovery is to just come to the Purview portal, and based on your read access to those SQL sources and assets, you can come discover it in a single pane of glass. Manual curation. So if you're an owner on that SQL database, in addition to being a reader, you can go in and add business context, like a description, a tag, a custom sensitive information type, system sensitive information type, tags. All of those things that contextualize that information can be done as well if you're an owner on that SQL database. All of this is open APIs enabled still. So if you have, let's say, an AWS RDS database or a DB2 database, you can use our open APIs to manually create assets and add those same sets of business context as well. And then we're making it easy to share in a governed way. So currently we have support only for storage and data lakes, where you can just go in, do a right-click share, and you can do it within your tenant or across tenants, all for free. So these are the sets of capabilities that we have, which we'll show you through a cool demo later on as well, as it relates to Microsoft Purview Discovery. Now, the immediate question you're going to ask me is, OK, what's the difference between Microsoft Purview Discovery and the enterprise offering that we have today? So it's along several pivots here. So for example, I spoke to you about live view, but with the enterprise version, you can connect to 55 plus sources. You can scan, classify, inventory that at scale, and do that on a schedule so that all of your metadata is available and is kept very fresh and up to date. You can only apply annotations and classifications manually in the discovery tier, but in the enterprise tier, you can do all of this at scale with scanning. You can also have manual edits or descriptions, tags, as I mentioned, with the discovery tier, but with the enterprise tier, everything is automated again. So it's the ease with which you can do all of this. There are also limits in terms of the number of objects in the discovery tier. Nothing of that sort in the enterprise version. We also have capabilities like data map history that's limited within the discovery tier, which Vlad will showcase to you in terms of audit, but it's a lot more capable with respect to the enterprise tier in terms of the different things that we enable audit on. There's a bunch of other capabilities that are available in the enterprise tier: fine-grained access control, workflows and business rules, business assets, managed attributes, automated scans for sources outside just Azure or Microsoft sources, so you can connect to an RDS, a DB2, anything out there. Automated lineage capture, which I will throw some light on later in the presentation as well. You have advanced analytics and insights that you can view to ensure that the governance posture of your organization is kept intact. And finally, policy, which Vlad will deep dive on, which is available only in the enterprise version. So this is a snapshot of what's in the discovery tier and what's in the enterprise tier. I'll go into this via our demo as well, but like I mentioned, we support 55 plus sources. Any kind of SQL that you can think of, whether it's Arc-enabled SQL, SQL DB, MI, SQL Server on premises, we support those sources. You can connect to those sources, scan, classify, inventory them, get rich schema along with their data types, and then you can go in and as data stewards, you can contextualize that with business metadata as well. On the right, you can see all of the different database type sources that we support outside of Microsoft. So we truly are supportive of governance across your hybrid data estate. Metadata link. So what we see today that's available to all of our customers is you need to register a source, set up a rule set up a scan, set up a credential, apply that credential, run your scans, and do that with a certain frequency. And all of this is a little bit of an administrative overhead, although it needs to be done only once. And once you set up your schedule, all of that is kept up to date. Now, what we're making even easier for all of your SQL database owners is just to navigate to the Azure portal and turn on a toggle that says, make my metadata available to Microsoft Purview. And with that single toggle, it's kept up to date. We handle all of the scheduling. We handle all of the collection of metadata. And it's auto-magically available to you in the map and in all of the applications that are built on top of the map. So this is something that we are actively private previewing right now. So you will start to see this coming up in public preview and GAs over the next 6 to 12 months. So we're super excited about this capability. The next thing is SQL provenance and lineage. We support two types of lineage information here. One is if you have Azure Data Factory or Synapse or Fabric orchestrating and moving data from one source to another, then we automatically capture lineage for that. And in addition to that, we also capture dynamic lineage, which means as part of our scans, we can tell you if a specific stored procedure moved data from one table to another or transformed data within a single table within your database. So you get that level of visibility, how your data is moving and getting transformed within a specific database. Asset curation and discovery. So you can have data stewards come in, navigate to these SQL sources, which I'll also show you a demo of, and add very rich context, right from managed attributes to ratings, to classifications, to labels, to having a specific asset be called certified. So there are several things that a steward can come in and ensure that the asset is annotated with, so that one, you make sure all of these assets align with your governance posture and requirement, and two is that you aid in discovery, searching, and browsing of these assets. Okay, so now we're done with all of the talking. Let's get into the demos for this morning. Okay, so this is what the Microsoft Purview discovery looks like. It's as simple as if you are an enterprise customer of Microsoft, which means you either use Azure, Fabric, M365, Dynamics, Power Apps, one of these solutions in an enterprise setting. All you need to do is go to purview.microsoft.com and you have this available to you. Now, there are certain solutions that you see here, and this is the coming together of the M365 compliance and the Azure Purview, but I would focus only on the data catalog for now, because here this specific customer, Contoso, already has access to all of the entitlements that gives them solutions like information protection, compliance manager, so on. But the part I want us to focus on is this data catalog. So if you go in here, I've not set up a single source or a single scan, but me, as the signed-in user, has access to a bunch of Fabric sources and a bunch of Azure sources in SQL database, data lakes, and we are going to increase connectivity to a lot more sources. So if I navigate to be able to browse, let's say by source type, and navigate to a specific Azure SQL database, let's say test DB2 is my database. I go to my sales LT schema and navigate to the product table. Now you see that I see the table and its schema all available to me without a single step of setup. Yes, please go ahead. Yep. Is that better? OK, great. So this SQL database and its contents are available to me in this single pane of glass via the data catalog, all for free, based on my read access to this database directly on the source itself. Now, I told you at the beginning of the presentation that if I'm a reader, all I can see is that, hey, there's the schema, those are all the columns, those are the data types, the column description, something that someone else adds. Now, if I'm an owner on this database, I can go and additionally add metadata to it as well, so that other users within my organization can go in, search, and browse, and really look for the data that adds value to their processes. So for example, assuming I'm an owner in this case, I can go in and, let's say, give this a description. And I can add in a system classification. Which one do I add? Let's just add names for now. And we support more than 208 out of the box, by the way. So now you can see, as an owner, I can go add that context. And if I want to have this asset be available to everyone who already has read access to the SQL source itself, they can just go in to purview.microsoft.com, either directly from the home screen or from the search on top, say, search for something like product. And you will see that I get navigated to that exact SQL asset. And you see that now I know that it has names, it has a list price, which also has an appended name, and it has all of these descriptions. So that's a little bit about the discovery tier, where all of these sources that you don't really register a source or set up a scan for are just auto-magically available to you based on your permissions in the source system. Now, if you recollect, I showed you that table. There's a discovery tier and there's an enterprise tier, and of course, there's a lot of difference between the two. Once you have started evaluating the product and you find this to be super cool, it's as simple as 2 clicks for you to upgrade to the enterprise version. So all you need to do is click on that rocket button that you see here and bring in a subscription. So if you do that and hit upgrade, then now you have the enterprise version with all of the things that was on the right-hand side of that table that I showed you. I'm not going to do this because this is my discovery tier demo environment. But let's say I did that. I brought in an Azure subscription. This is the full-fledged enterprise offering of the Azure Purview side that you saw on the right, if you recollect that diagram, along with all of the different M365 compliance apps and solutions in one single shell. So you see that you have data map, which you may be used to, where you can register a source, set up a scan, set up collections, fine-grained access control, all of that. You have data catalog, but it's a lot more richer in terms of having no limits. You also have a very advanced search with auto-completes, ngram, really advanced capabilities. and so on, along with estate insights and everything else that I showcased on the right-hand side of the table. In addition to that, based on the announcement that we made yesterday at Ignite, you will see that things that were in marketing collateral and documentation is now a reality. You will see that you have the data map, you have audit, you have compliance manager, e-discovery, Microsoft information protection, insider risk management, all of these solutions available in a single shell, and it's all integrated for multi-cloud governance, data protection, compliance, risk, and privacy. So now I showed you what the discovery tier is. I showed you how to upgrade and how seamless it is. This is the single shell where you can start searching right from the home page. You also have trials and recommendations where you can try out things like PRIVA and compliance assessments. You have the Knowledge Center, which is an extensive resource where you have docs, videos, blogs to help you learn more about Microsoft Purview. So this is truly the coming together of the M365 compliance and Azure Purview product families. Now, the next thing I wanted to showcase to you is SQL and all of the sources we support there. So if I navigate to the data map, and if I hit register here, you will see that if I want to narrow it down to only SQL type sources, this is everything that we support connectivity for, right from Amazon RDS to Azure Arc-enabled SQL Server to Cosmos DB SQL API, SQL Database, SQL Server, MySQL, and so on. Now, if I just look at the different databases that we support, you will see that it's almost everything out there, right from Dataverse to Cassandra to Google BigQuery to Oracle and SAP. So we truly, as I mentioned earlier, support multi-cloud connectivity, mapping, and governance across the board. So this is a scan that I've already set up. So you will see that I can register an Azure SQL database. I can set up a scan, and I can also set up a schedule. So if I look at this, you will see that a preview capability that we support here is lineage extraction. So this is the dynamic lineage that I was talking to you about, where if you have a stored procedure that's transforming data, we can get all of that information into the system and make sure it's reflected via the asset details. So there's a schedule for this scan, and it's kept up to date, so you don't have to really even worry about it. At the beginning, if you've done all of that work of the source, scan, schedule, it's all kept up to date. So this is what a fully hydrated environment, a real customer environment like Adatum would look like, where you have several different sources and source types across Azure, Hive, Data Lake, BigQuery, and so on. Now, let's try to search for something in the enterprise version. As I said, you have suggestions, you have Ngram, you have very advanced search capabilities. If I search for something like sales, you will see that I'll be presented only the assets that are relevant to me. I can further filter it down. So let's say I'm looking for an Azure SQL database type and an asset type that is a specific table. And once I apply all of these filters, you see that maybe hundreds or thousands, or sometimes with some of our biggest customers, millions of results, firstly is presented in a very relevant fashion to me, and then I can filter it down just to search for those one or two things that I'm really looking for. And if I go to this sales order header, this is all of the rich context every single table can carry, right from an asset description to managed attributes to classifications to having a collection path. You can add business context with glossary terms. You can view properties, some basic properties and advanced properties. You can have schema be reflected with all of the different columns, its own classifications, its own terms, data type, and very in detail descriptions. And this is what is going to be truly important to a lot of us here, where you can see the end-to-end lineage of something that is transformed from SQL. It has a bunch of copy into a data lake. It's further copied into Hive, and then finally available in a data lake for you to run some Spark jobs on. You can see end-to-end lineage, and if you want to either root cause when a column has changed and where it actually stemmed from, or you want to do impact analysis of changing a specific column somewhere here and seeing the impact on a other table that's a downstream consumer, you can do all of that. And in line, I can switch to this specific Azure blob path, and I can also see that, hey, this is the lineage curve for that, and I can see that there was a specific column that carried over data right from SQL to Hive to a data lake. I think that brings me to the end of my demo. Just to give you a quick recap, we went through the Microsoft Purview discovery tier, all of the cool stuff that you get for free just to try out the product and make sure that it meets your business requirements. We showed you how easy it is to upgrade from the discovery tier to the enterprise tier. We showed you all of the capabilities available in the enterprise tier, and by no means this covers everything, but at least some of them as it relates to SQL. We'd probably need a 3-hour demo if you want to see everything. So we showed you the connectivity to all of the SQL sources, to everything out there that you potentially have in your hybrid data estate. And then we showed you the power of discoverability, search, attributes, and context on an asset to truly power your organization to achieve their business goals. So with that, Vlad, do you want to take it away?
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah.
Does this cover, like, if they did a calculated column off of that in Power BI, would that be on the
Absolutely. So it's truly end-to-end, right up till the column level. And if, let's say in this case, SQL was a data set that powered something in Power BI on a report and dashboard, we would show you that as well. So if you had a little bit more time, I would show you specific examples, but we do support that.
Okay, let's do this. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, very good. So I'm going to cover a couple of things that are more related to security. So far, we've been very broad. We've been focusing a lot on the governance aspects. Now you're going to start seeing how having a data map, having a data catalog is useful to be able to enforce security as well. Okay, so we'll cover the data policies. And a fundamental aspect of security is being able to track what's going on and record it, right? So we'll cover that piece, and we have a demo that ties the two things. Let's start talking about what the challenges are that companies face, currently. In a very simple setting here, you have the data consumers, you have data assets, could be like SQL databases. You have a set of data access admins, could be like sysadmins, and then you have approvers. Those are probably more related to the business. And in a very unsophisticated environment, the data consumer would go to the business owner of the data, the approver, and say, hey, I need access to this particular database. They will use email, and then that approver goes and says, sysadmin, go and grant access this person, right? And the only transaction that is recorded there, the only tracking of that is that email trail. And that is very unstructured, it's not clear, it's inconsistent. So what are the problems with that? Like, it's difficult, like when you have a security breach and you ask, hey, why was this person given access, it's very difficult to go back and reconstruct what happened, right? That's why more and more, it's important to have, more structure around it, and we'll see it, how, Purview approaches that piece. Also, when you have these data access admins with too much privilege, you are putting a lot of trust on them, right? They will have access to the user data, even though their function is basically probably grant access to other people, right? Among other things, like maybe they need to keep up systems up and running because those are the critical systems for the company. But there is a lot of effort involved. It's not really scalable as the company grows. The demand on these people to grant access it becomes more and more difficult. And then it's very difficult to enforce that when you grant access to another person, you're only granting access for what that other person needs to have access to, right? The principle of least privilege. Grant only the minimum access that is necessary for this other person to do their job. No more than that. And as we discussed, the lack of visibility on who has access, the failure to be able to revoke access when people leave the company, makes it very difficult for the investigations, right? And also for showing more and more there are regulations around, right? Compliance regulations, auditing that needs to happen. It's difficult to show that. Okay, so in Microsoft Purview, there is this app called the Data Policies app. And it's basically, as Purview you have seen from Vishal, it's a cloud-based experience. Is a single pane of glass. So the idea here is that you will shift to be able to manage all the access in the data state to Purview if you want that central view. And you can do it little by little, right? You can transition little by little. It's also scalable, and we'll show some examples of why it is scalable. It definitely involves a lot less time for an admin to be able to grant access than going to the SQL server, logging in, creating a user, and then granting permissions. It's a lot more automated than that. It's integrated with the data map and the catalog. So what does that integration provide? It basically makes it easy for that security admin that is going to grant the access to find the particular asset that needs to be given access for the person that is requesting. Or it has another model. So Vishal demonstrated a bit ago that there is a way to browse the catalog and find assets. So now I can empower a data consumer to go search for what they want and request access, right? So, and then, we'll see, the experience around it. I'll go a little bit more in depth, but that's supported. We call it self-service. And because all of these different sources that we shall talk about, they are all supported, right? And so, we have a path. Not all of them are integrated from the perspective of access control, but we have a path to keep integrating and evolving this for more and more support. And also, all of this richness of attributes, sensitivity labels, SITs, and any other attribute that is tagged to a particular data asset, we have a way to be able to, in the future, create access control around it, right? So that's where, ABAC policies would come in. So we have a parallel permission system. So there are permissions flowing from Purview to the data sources. We're not using the SQL native permissions. So SQL is basically taking the union of the permissions that are flowing from the data policy app plus the native ones and computing the end result, and that's what somebody that is trying to access with a client will get. And the latency in making the decision of whether somebody needs to have access or not is minimal. It's very similar to if it was native, right? Because we have an SDK that we incorporate into the different data sources that we integrate. So there are 3 RBAC experiences right now in the data policy app. You can see it there in the screenshot. Data policies, self-service, and DevOps policies. Let's talk very briefly about the space for each, okay? So they are complementary. The 3 of them are RBAC. Data policies is that experience where you have like some type of security admin that has the task to create a policy to give access to a particular resource, could be a SQL table, to a particular group. And that group is a Microsoft Entra group. And Microsoft Entra is just the new word for Azure AD that you probably knew from before. Self-service is that experience that I talk about where somebody goes and browses and searches for data assets, discovers that they want something. They can explore a little bit the attributes. They can explore the schema, a little bit of the lineage, and then they decide to ask for access, request access. I want read access. They provide the justification in Purview, and then that triggers a workflow, and there are a set of approvers on the back. Could be business approvers that don't have any idea of how the technical aspects of security work. And if approved, the policy gets created in the background, okay? And starts providing access to the individual or the group. And then we have DevOps. So 1 and 2 are about access to the user data. Number 3 is about access to the system metadata. Those are the DMVs, DMFs in SQL. Okay, and those are to keep systems up and running, performing with high uptime, or to investigate and review security auditing aspects in SQL. Okay, so I'm gonna. Could we hold for at the end? Yeah, just so that everybody has a chance. I'll try to go faster so that we have time. So I'm going to highlight very quickly the benefits of the data policy app. 3 value propositions here. We're about simplification. We are about enhancing the security by providing structure and being able to limit the privileges that are being granted. And we're about reduction of effort. And I'm not going to go line by line, but that's mainly what the experience is after. The last line, though, is important because we announced at Ignite the support of the audit for the data map, the catalog, but also the data policy. Everything that is being done in the data policy app is now logged in the audit app. And that is a big enhancement to the security. So let's talk a little bit about the data source integration for the data policy app. These 3 main SQL flavors are supported. SQL Server 2022, Azure SQL Database, and SQL MI. For the DevOps policies, the 3rd experience, they are all GA. For self-service and data owner policies, they are between public preview and private preview, making progress. We also support storage, as you see in the bottom, and we are integrating and in private preview with Cosmos DB. Policies on subscriptions and resource groups. That I can create a policy on an entire subscription or resource group, and to the extent that the data sources that are in that subscription or resource group are enabled for Purview, they will enforce that policy. So that basically with a single policy, and you'll see it in the scenario that I have for DevOps policies, You see, with a single policy, I can create access to a good number of data sources at the same time. So it really simplifies and saves time, makes it scalable. So let's go a little bit deeper into the DevOps policies. So these are the type of policies we said that target the system metadata. They are going to allow IT operations people to have access to do their job, to keep systems up and running, to maximize the uptime, to make sure that the servers have enough resources, the queries have enough resources behind to analyze wait states, et cetera, et cetera. The experience is very simple, right? We'll go through it. And it's an RBAC policy. So you'll have a set of people, or a group, or a set of principals that will have access. That's the subject of the policy. You will have a scope, which is where it's going to be enforced. In this diagram here, or screenshot, you see here a subscription resource group path. It's usually an ARM path, right? And so here, this is a policy on an entire resource group. And then you choose one of two role definitions. You can either choose performance monitor or security auditor, okay? Now, there is a way to do these things from the API as well, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate later. So we support REST API, so very simple JSON payloads, or even without the JSON payload, you can test it. The get to an endpoint here, which is basically API Purview service, Microsoft.com, followed by this URL path here with the version, will give you a list of the policies. You need to have, of course, a bearer token. You need to have the privileges, and I'll demonstrate that sending these requests. If you want to create a policy, you do a put. You specify here the Purview resource name, and then you say, hey, I want to allow SQL Performance Monitor to these principals and to these principal groups. These are Microsoft Entra IDs, and to this resource path. As simple as that, that will create the policy. If I want to retrieve it, I do the get. If I want to delete it, I do a delete. So you could integrate this with your homegrown scripts. If you don't like the Purview UI for the policies, you can definitely make use of it. Okay, let's talk about the audit. So this is the Microsoft 365 compliance audit app that is now inside the unified portal, as Vishal showed. We are integrating that app with a ton more stuff. It already has dozens and dozens of different services, including Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive. It's integrated with Microsoft Entra for events that are coming related to AAD, I guess. And so you can log all of that. You can search the logs. You can export the information for further analysis. The key scenarios here are basically compliance, auditing, security, troubleshooting, debugging stuff, but a lot of these, the emphasis is also going to be on forensic investigations more and more, okay? So for each one of the audit events, the basic thing that you will get is date and time, who performed that, or who was responsible for generating that event, what was the user, and what was changed, right? What was the old state of an object and the new state of an object, so that it can be compared. Let's take a look at a forensics example, because I highlighted forensics. So in data governance, it's very typical to have classifications on top of the data assets, right? And in Microsoft, we derive the sensitivity labels, for example, highly confidential, based on some of those classifications. We do it automatically, okay? So highly confidential sensitivity label may be tagged to a particular data asset because there was a particular classification. So, for example, social security number tag on top of that data asset. We also enforce access based on sensitivity labels, as you know, right? So I can prevent most of the people in the company to have access to sensitive information by creating policies based on the sensitivity label, right? Prevent most everybody in the company to have access to information labeled highly confidential except for this list of people. What happens if I have a malicious actor that goes and removes the classification from the data asset, right? That will remove the sensitivity label. That will in turn prevent the enforcement, the automatic enforcement. So data can now, that has social security number, can now be exfiltrated because it's not protected, right? So we want to make sure that all of these activities are logged, right? And you know, this is fundamental in how we were thinking about integration of the audit with the data map. So basically, this is solved by searching and understanding for this particular data asset, which classification was removed. I also need to have the list that maps these classifications to sensitivity labels to understand what happened there. And then further, I can see, you know, who did it and what was the person granting this malicious actor access, right? And so I can, you know, go back in time and understand the whole sequence. This is the experience to search the audit events. We will see it a little bit more when I get to a demo. So we'll make a pause there. We'll get into the details. And so let's go and do the demo. Here is the scenario. I have Adele. She works for IT. She's part of the IT operations. And she's tasked with keeping very critical servers up and running. She wants to maximize the uptime. She wants to make sure that these systems have enough resources to power the queries. And the load of queries kind of changes over time, right? So her job is very critical. She needs access to be able to see the performance counters in SQL. But also, we don't want to make her a sysadmin. We want to make sure that we abide by the principle of least privilege. And so we also want it scalable, right? So she's in charge. You see this diagram here. He's in charge of a bunch of different SQL resources, data sources. They are, of different type. Azure SQL DB, Azure SQL MI, SQL Server 2022 that has been ARC-enabled. And we want to do it with a single policy. She has a backup because she, has the right to vacation. She has the right to have, sick days. We want a backup there as well. So we create an AAD group, a Microsoft Entra ID group called Group Perfmon. Diego is going to be that security admin in Purview that is going to create a policy for this, okay? So he is going to create a DevOps policy that targets all the resources in this resource group. He's going to create the policy against the resource group. The name of this resource group is called Marketing RG. And what we'll show first is that Adele cannot connect before we create the policy. Then we create the policy. We show Adele being able to connect, but only to get the performance counter information and not the user data. And then we'll show how that gets captured in the audit log. So let's kick it off. I'm going to also do it, like last year we did it based on the UI. To make it a little bit different, we'll do it now based on the API. And I'm going to use Postman. So right now, the initial state is that I send a request. I loaded here Diego's bearer token, okay, to initialize it, if you're familiar with Postman. I'm going to go to Purview and see here the experience of the DevOps policies. If I refresh, there are no policies, okay? Now, based on the API, I'm going to send a put request to create a DevOps policy. As we said before, the URL is pretty simple. It has the endpoint. The particular resource is the marketing RG. Here is the principal, the GUID for Adele, and the GUID for the AAD group that she belongs to. I don't need to do the two things at the same time because anyways, Adele belongs to that group, but just for the purpose of demonstrating the pieces of the JSON here. And then I'm going to give them SQL Performance Monitor, and here is the resource path, okay? That's the subscription and the resource group. Very simple. So I'm going to send this, and I get 201 created with a little bit more metadata. Who created the policy, what was the time, when was the policy last modified, etc. So now if I go to the UI, I refresh and I see that I now have a policy, right, that is granting Adele and this group performance monitor over the marketing resource group. Now, let's go and try. I'm gonna, the latency for these policies to get propagated is five minutes. So I'm gonna shortcut that, issuing a command that is otherwise not necessary. Doesn't matter. But that, refreshes the cache in the SQL MI. Now I'm gonna try to access a SQL MI data source that belongs to that resource group, okay? So I have one policy in there. And now we're going to try to log in with Adele. And we're going to select Adele here. Now Adele is able to connect. What can Adele do? So she can take a look at performance bottlenecks. She can analyze running queries, all of these DMV, DMF commands that you guys know pretty well. This is still executing, so let's just wait a second until it's done. Okay, blocking issues, virtual file stats, okay. All the goodness that you may want to get, DBCC, et cetera, et cetera. So now, let's take a look to see, I didn't grant her security auditing, just performance monitoring, right? So if I try to do something, DMF or DMV on the security auditor type of role, she will be denied. She will get, like, you don't have permission to perform this action. If she wants to access, this is the most important thing. If she wants to access the user data, she will be denied, right? So now we are doing this in a safe manner. Now let's go to the audit. What happened when Diego created the policy? So I navigate to the unified portal of Microsoft Purview. Here is the audit app. When I click on it, I get to this experience where I can search, right? So I can provide date and time range for the search. I can search for some activities. For example, if I'm interested in the data policies, I will select some activities here for data policies. Otherwise, there is like a huge list of things, right, for all of these different functionality that has been integrated into this app. I can search using keywords, right? I can search using users that were responsible for the events, right? I can provide their aliases. So the events take about 30 to 90 minutes to propagate to the audit, so they are not immediate. That's why I prepackaged here a search that I did a couple of days ago, just to demonstrate. If I was going to search, what I just did in half an hour, it would show up. It would show up. But let's take a look at this. So if I go inside, this is already a filter search. So there is a bunch of events, so let's take one of them. It shows me the date and time it happened, which user was responsible for this. That user is also shown here, is Diego, the one that created the policy. It says policy was created. It says which workload was responsible for that, which is Purview policy. Which type of policy was the DevOps policy. The policy didn't exist before, right? So the old value is null. The new value has the relevant content of the policy, right? Which users were approved or which groups were approved in the policy, what was the resource path, right? What was the role that they were granted access to, okay? Okay, very good. So that basically concludes the demo. Let me just very briefly show some key takeaways. I'll let you read. I won't go through them. And then very quickly we'll shift into questions so that you guys can have an opportunity to ask your questions. Yeah, go ahead.
This might be a dumb question, but does this work with this purview and data policies? Does it work with SQL 2022 on-prem as long as there's that Azure data link?
We do it via the Azure Arc service. So as you can have SQL Server 2020, you install Azure Arc, you enable Azure Arc, and then you're game.
What about propagation of access control? So if you give a user request access in one system, you already have that lineage. Could you be able to allow the propagation of that read access?
We don't have that functionality implemented, but it's a good idea. Yeah.
And follow up on that one then. How do you is there any plans to handle something like right to deletion, like GDPR, where you have to delete their PII data across all platforms and then have an audit trail to say, yeah, it's been done?
Yeah.
Let me take that. So we have an entire privacy app that you might have noticed on top of the map, and that's not yet available. So it will go into preview starting March of next year, where the exact kind of things that you're talking about in terms of data subject rights and assessments being the two key capabilities will be available early next year. So it uses the same map. So it has visibility into everything, but it has those kinds of data subject rights and the applicability of those signals to a subset of assets in the map.
I guess it's one more.
Yes, definitely. So we actually have both the API route and the UI route to introduce things on that lineage graph. If time had permitted, I would have shown you more examples there, but you can, if you have the right set of permissions, navigate to the lineage canvas, and it's as simple as right-click, create a new custom lineage node, and also tie it with an arc with, let's say, a SQL or a Power BI data set that already exists.
Atlas.
Definitely, yeah. So what Vlad mentioned, so we have open APIs which follow the Atlas standard. So we support the batch input APIs as well. There are still recommendations that we provide for size of batch, size of entities, but if you had written up a script and if you want to bring in a bunch of things, we absolutely support it.
Right.
Does the, so you showed it work with Fabric. Does the discovery version work with Fabric?
Yes. So that's currently in private preview right now. So if you have, let's say, Fabric, enterprise customer of Fabric, you go to purview.microsoft.com. I think it was already there in the demo tile because I have the right set of flags. So if you go to Fabric, you'll be able to see your workspace and the constituent entities within that, based on your permission.
Policies work with the workspace then?
No, I said workflow. So when I mentioned, no, I mentioned that there is a workflow that gets triggered. It's a Purview workflow that gets triggered so that the approvers get notified via email that somebody's requesting access to a specific data asset, and then they, when they receive that email, they get a link, they get redirected to Purview, they can review the request and approve it or deny it.
But if you don't have access to the workspace, you can't see that data anyway.
So,
Oh, you mean in Fabric?
Yeah.
So the self-service is not yet integrated with Fabric.
Right.
It's in our roadmap.
so let me clarify a little bit there. So Microsoft Purview Discovery, if you have read access on the source itself, then you can go and view your workspace and its entities. Firstly, policy, everything that Vlad spoke about is not available in Microsoft Purview Discovery. You need to get the enterprise version. At that point, you can register that Fabric source and scan things in. And we, as Vlad said, don't yet support self-service, but when we do, the workflow that he mentioned will be applicable to that workspace as well.
Yeah.
I think there's a question there.
Yes, when a user requests access, that kicks off the workflow for approval, is that configurable by asset to who the approver would be?
Yes, so in Purview we have this concept of collections, which are folders where you can register data sources. So you can organize your data estate, and then I can set up approvers based on the collection.
On the classification side, is it able to read into XML or JSON data types
Yes.
within the column?
Yes, it can classify XML and JSON content if it's in a data lake. Do you mean XML and JSON content nested within a column?
Yeah.
So currently, we actually disabled that based on some false positives that we were getting, but we're looking to enhance that over a period of time and be able to give you that nested classification as well.
And then one other question. Can it, so I guess it kind of answers that already. So when it's classifying, is it using the column names or the data within the column?
But you can, so if you create a custom, there are some out of the OOB classifications, out of the box. And we already come with 200 or more different classifications that cover most of the stuff that is relevant to compliance, right? So for example, people's names, addresses, social security number, passports, etc. That's already there, but you can create a set of custom classifications, and you can specify regex rules or dictionaries that apply to the values, and then you can specify also regex rules that apply to the column name.